The time is just gone 17 minutes past 9 as we continue with the show this morning. And we stay in the company of our Salam Media listeners, our viewers, and also One Nation 88.9 FM out of Polokwane. Wonderful that you are able to join us on this Friday morning. If you have just tuned in, we wish you a wonderful Friday, inshallah. Jummah Mubarak to one and all. And let us enjoy the beautiful blessings of this beautiful day of Jummah, inshallah. And looking ahead at the show this morning, shortly, we've got uh, Gideon Chitanga, Research Associate at the African Center for the Study of the United States at the University of Witswatersrand, looking at some of the updates around the world. And we're talking with Tahir Maipa a little later on. All you need to know about the up and coming second annual South African Black Muslim Conference. And later on in the program, the daughter of the late Imam Harun, Fatima Harun Masood, will be joining us after the Minister of Justice, Ronald Lamola, requested the reopening of the inquest into the death of Imam Abdullah Harun. But right now, we go across to be joined by Gideon Chitanga. Gideon, good morning to you and welcome to the show.
Thank you, sir. Good morning.
Yes, wonderful you're able to join us now. We are looking at some of the updates around the world, and one of them in particular, looking at China, looking at their COVID-19 policy, where we've learned about Shanghai ending its 8-week lockdown. But the question is, can China do away with a zero COVID policy?
Yes, I think under the circumstances, the Chinese government is committed itself to sticking to the zero COVID policy. And this policy is premised on the idea that the state is trying to ensure that they arrest the spread of COVID, given that it's still potentially a huge threat by ensuring public safety to all its population. I think it is important to share that China is the highest population in the world at 1.4 billion, and some of its cities have a very high density of population. And the idea is to ensure that, given the density of population, the best way is to control and regulate the movement, the contact, the spread of infections. But within the same context, they also apply all the other interventions, the identifying COVID cases, tracing, administering quick medical, arresting the disease before it spreads. And this is intended to ensure that the Chinese people are safe, the elderly people are safe, the young people are safe, as well as everybody else. To my understanding, for sure there has been some criticism against the policy, but if you consider that already we are seeing reports on media, the CNN yesterday was saying COVID cases are starting to increase in the US. One could say the COVID regulations still play a very important role, especially if they are strategically sequenced and applied with other interventions. Then they really help to contain the spread of diseases. In a lot of countries, we are seeing a spike of different types of mutations of COVID, which indicates that it's still a major threat. So I think that as a domestic initiative within China to arrest COVID, I think the zero COVID policy is still very effective. And we should underline the fact that it is not intended to end COVID, right? It is intended to control, to manage it, because that's where the world is.
Yes. Now, looking at, you mentioned the spike, looking at the United States of America, and we are now learning about a spike in the number of COVID-19 cases in the US, Gideon.
Yes. We yesterday, I'm not sure of the statistics offhand, but two key issues were emerging out of the US: the increase in cases of COVID and other diseases that are also emerging new ones, but especially the increase in COVID cases. The second thing is the shortage of drugs, some of which are very critical in preventing the disease or curing some of the symptoms. And what is important to say, I think, is that the US opened its economy, removed all the regulations. I think in all the states, people are free to move and interact. Unfortunately, this opening up of the economy is coinciding with the increasing of cases of COVID. In other words, the increase of opening the country to higher cases of COVID, increasing cases of COVID. So once the US is also has the highest number of fatalities or deaths from COVID cases, and I think other countries as well. So I am saying this to argue that police choice comes with consequences. And in the case of COVID and a lot of uncertainties around what we know about it, I think opening up the economies without key interventions to protect the people can be potentially dangerous, and we are already getting indications that there are threats. So we still are in the COVID situation, and it's important for governments to very carefully look at their own domestic situations and say what would be the best interventions going forward in terms of protecting public safety, but also managing other interests that are a part of the interest of the human species or human society.
Yes, and Gideon, just finally looking at the murder and the killing of journalist Shirley Abu Akleh. Now, yesterday we spoke to someone where Al Jazeera has obviously taken this matter up with the International Criminal Court, but we're now learning about a group of Israeli human rights organizations, scholars, members of civil society, making a formal request to the United Nations to probe the killing of the Palestinian journalists.
I think this is a very serious case. That it impinges the murder of Shireen, and I think I would call it a cold blood murder of Shireen by a state agent, by the Israeli army. It's a serious case that impinges on the freedom of expression and the freedom of journalists to engage in their work without threat. We know that journalism is a dangerous profession, and there are threats coming from all kinds of situations. But where a state is involved and state actors are involved, then it becomes more serious because governments should protect journalists irrespective of whether they like them or not. I think that we are hearing more voices coming out is positive, but what is disappointing is the tendency from the Israeli side to always insulate themselves and deny accountability in many situations where they are dealing with the Palestinians. And I think this is unfortunate. In terms of approaches to find a solution to the Palestinian problem, murder should be unacceptable and it's a crime, but also the Israel government should show itself to be accountable and take responsibility. And I think in this case, every finger is pointing to the Israeli state having or actors within it or its army having assassinated Shireen.
Yes, and also when one looks at this letter that was signed, and when one looks at the groups, the Israeli Human Rights Organization, groups called Looking the Occupation in the Eye, Mothers Against Violence, and Maxim Watch. Now, obviously, that says a lot that, all of these groups are seriously concerned. And, we're talking about female violence in this country. In South Africa, we've been talking about it a long time. But when you have a group like Mothers Against Violence in Israel and the Occupation in the Eye tell us that there are Israelis, there are people who are genuinely concerned about the human rights violations that are taking place in Israel, carried out by the Israeli apparatus, and more so against people like Shireen, against journalists.
Yes. You see, And like I said earlier, the key thing is that the state, the Israeli state, is increasingly authoritarian and accountable in its dealings against the Palestinians and against the perceived supporters of the Palestinians. And I think that we are at a point where they should be held accountable for their side of human rights violations. They should be, I think, brought to court. In the case of Shireen, the Israeli state should actually bring forth the actors who were directly involved in her execution, in assassination, for lack of a better word. We have seen trials and calls for human rights prosecutions in Ukraine, and I don't understand why Israel should continue to be an exceptional case. And we are not saying that the Israeli people are bad. We are saying the state and the way it acts, and particularly its the continued violations of human rights cases, human rights where it concerns the Palestinians. That is something that is really concerning. And the killing of Shireen in cold blood just highlights, I think, the day-to-day experiences of of the ordinary people, the Palestinians themselves. If Shireen, a prominent journalist, could be killed in such a way, you wonder what happens, what are the experiences of the ordinary the Palestinians who are targeted on a day-to-day basis.
Well, certainly, Gideon, but thank you very much for that and for the updates and being with us this morning here on Salam Media. We wish you all the best and please take care.
Thank you so much.
Gideon Chitanga, Research Associate at the African Center for the Study of the United States at the University of Witswatersrand this morning, providing some of these global updates, the updates from right across the entire world. The time is just heading for 9:30. We come back, we'll be talking about the second annual upcoming South African Black Muslims Conference with Tahir Maipa, who is the conference spokesperson.